Okay, the next thing that we're talking about is properties of parallelograms. Alright, so properties of parallelograms. We're starting with quadrilaterals. Quadrilaterals have 4 sides. We're coming down to talk about parallelograms. Okay, so parallelograms, we know, have opposite sides are parallel, and that is how you can tell I am a parallelogram. You guys remember that song? Okay. Now, in terms of drilling down on this, we know that parallelograms have diagonals that are not necessarily congruent themselves, but they are going to be bisected and so cut into these 2 equal parts. Okay? Then from there, if we're talking about parallelograms, we have a couple of different types. Oh, I should have drawn this a little bit bigger. We can have a square. We could have a rhombus. A rhombus has all 4 sides congruent, so it's similar to a square in that manner. The only difference between a rhombus and a square is that your rhombus is going to have angles that they're going to be congruent across from each other. They're going to be supplementary on the sides, whereas my right triangle has 90-degree angles. Notice when I draw the diagonals on my rhombus, those are not congruent. However, they are doing 2 things that are important, a couple things actually that are important for you to know. One, they're forming a 90-degree angle in that little interior spot where the 2 diagonals meet. They are bisecting each other just like all of our other parallelograms. These are bisected. So even though they're not congruent, they are being bisected. In addition, these are bisecting the angles that they come into. So here, this angle right here is being cut into 2 perfectly. This is being cut into 2 perfectly. Okay, I think that's everything I can think of about a rhombus. The square we'll come back to in a second. Let's talk about the rectangle. Rectangles have 90 degrees. Their diagonals are special because their diagonals are congruent. Okay, so that's really important. Their diagonals are congruent. So now notice when I make these tick marks in the middle, this is being bisected, this is being bisected, but each of the bisected pieces are the same to show that all of the diagonals are congruent. So that applies to the square. On the diagonals in a rectangle, they are not forming 2 congruent angles. This angle is much smaller than this big angle here. But on a square, we get the best of both worlds. So when I draw my diagonals are going to be congruent. They're going to form a 90-degree angle in the middle, and they are also bisecting those 90-degree angles into 45-degree angles. All right, that's that subcategory. The next one we have is a trapezoid. Okay, so remember on the trapezoids, they kind of have 2 side lengths that are parallel and might look like this. So these 2 angles are going to add up to 180. These 2 are going to add up to 180. But unless it's an isosceles trapezoid, you can't make some of the summarizations we're going to. So isosceles trapezoids are special because their side lengths here and here are congruent. These top guys are parallel because it's part of parallelograms. And the bottom angles, which we call base angles, are congruent, and the top base angles are congruent. Together they're going to add up to 180. These diagonals are congruent, but notice they are not bisected. There. Okay, last one. We've got kites. These 2 sides are congruent, these 2 sides are congruent, and dun da da da, this was a horrible kite, let's fix it. When I draw this, it's going to form a 90-degree angle in the middle. Notice this long is clearly not being bisected, but this shorter is going to be bisected. Okay, also these angles are being bisected. Okay, those are some of the properties of parallelograms, and you need to be able to recognize those. So let's have you guys take a quick quiz here. Can you decide what type each of these are?